My fiancée lied about being pregnant to trap me after I paid all her debts, so I exposed everything quietly and she lost everything she tried stealing. I'm a 28-year-old guy, and I genuinely believed I had found the woman I'd grow old with. Emily was everything I thought I'd ever wanted. Charming, warm, ambitious in a way that made me admire her constantly. She had this infectious laugh that made the worst days feel lighter, and the way she talked about her career dreams made me feel like I could root for her forever. From the moment we met, there was this spark I couldn't ignore, and over the past 2 years, we had built what felt like a real partnership. Late-night talks about our future, weekend house hunting trips where we imagined our first apartment together, and quiet evenings planning a wedding we swore would be perfect. I loved seeing her confident, seeing her chase opportunities and passions, and I wanted to do everything I could to support her. That included helping with some of her debts. At first, it was small things, a couple of overdue bills here, a loan payment there, but it started to add up. I told myself it was fine. I was happy to help. "I just want you to worry less," I said one evening as she sipped her tea, her eyes distant but smiling. "You shouldn't be stressed about this stuff." She thanked me, squeezed my hand, and I felt this swell of pride that I could ease her burdens, that I could be the guy who made her life just a little easier. But there were moments that made me pause, little things that didn't sit right. She would casually mention she owes a lot but never went into details. When I asked, she'd laugh it off, saying, "Don't worry about it, I've got it handled." But the way her eyes darted away made my stomach knot. I noticed she was secretive about certain finances. Her phone would stay face down on the counter. She'd shuffle papers quickly whenever I entered the room, but I brushed it off. Everyone has little privacy, right? It wasn't a big deal. At least, that's what I kept telling myself. Still, late at night, I'd lie awake thinking about it, trying to rationalize the unease that had started creeping in. Something about her hesitation felt off, but the warmth of our plans and her smile kept me from questioning too deeply. I wanted to trust her completely, and maybe that was my first mistake. I started covering more of Emily's debts, telling myself it was just part of being a good partner. What began as a few small bills turned into credit card payments, overdue loans, and even her car installment. I convinced myself it was fine if she didn't have to stress. Neither did I. I worked extra hours, skipped nights out with friends, and even gave up a vacation I'd been saving for, just to make sure she was comfortable, watching her relax. Seeing her smile at me as if I was her hero felt worth it, even if it slowly drained me inside. At first, Emily thanked me often, hugging me, kissing me, and telling me I was amazing. But over time, the gratitude began to change. Her compliments were quieter, her smiles more calculating, and the way she spoke to me sometimes had this subtle edge, like I was expected to do all of this without question. "You're too generous, you know," she said one night sipping wine. But there was no warmth in it, only this quiet assessment. Like she was measuring how much I could be bent to her will. I started noticing inconsistencies too. A few large payments seemed to vanish without explanation, and when I asked, she'd dodge the question or laugh it off, brushing my concerns aside. "Don't worry about it," she'd say, patting my hand. But my gut twisted with unease. There was a part of me that knew I should dig deeper, but I loved her, and I wanted to believe in her. I wanted to be the man who could handle anything, for her, even if it meant ignoring the warning signs gnawing at the back of my mind. Friends began noticing the toll it was taking on me. "You're doing too much," one said gently. "She should be sharing the load, not letting you carry everything." I nodded, smiled, and laughed it off, pretending I didn't feel the exhaustion crushing me. I told myself that this was normal, that all relationships had sacrifices, and if it meant helping Emily, I could endure it. But late at night, when the apartment was quiet and I was alone with my thoughts, I felt a cold knot of fear settle in my chest. Something wasn't right, and I couldn't shake the feeling that beneath Emily's sweet smile, there was a side I hadn't yet seen, a side that might not care about me at all. That thought lingered as I drifted to sleep, unsettled and unsure, and I couldn't help but wonder how much of her love was real. I started noticing the cracks, little things that didn't make sense at first, but slowly began to pile up. Emily became distant, often lost in her phone for hours, scrolling or texting, sometimes laughing quietly to herself when I walked into the room. I asked once, trying to sound casual, "Who's that?" She just shrugged, her smile tight. "Just work stuff," she said, but the way she avoided my gaze made something inside me tense. I wanted to believe her, but my gut started whispering that something wasn't right. She grew defensive too. If I brought up money even, casually her tone would sharpen. "Why do you care so much about that?" She'd snap, like I was the problem for even thinking about it. I felt my chest tighten every time this happened, a mix of confusion and hurt. It was like walking on eggshells, trying to please someone I loved, yet never really knowing what would set them off. Some nights, I'd sit on the edge of the couch, staring at her as she typed furiously on her laptop, wondering what secrets were hiding behind that calm, polished exterior. Then came the day I overheard her on the phone. I didn't mean to listen, but I couldn't help it. Her voice carried through the thin walls of our apartment. She was talking to someone I didn't know, laughing in a way that made me freeze, saying things like, "Yeah, he has no idea. And don't worry, it's all working out perfectly." My stomach dropped. It was fleeting, just fragments, but it planted a seed of dread that grew every time I tried to rationalize it away. Despite everything, I tried to ignore the nagging fear, telling myself I was overreacting. I focused on our plans, our weekend trips to look at apartments, our talks about the wedding, the life we were supposedly building. I wanted to hold on to the warmth of those moments, the feeling that we were partners in everything. But late at night, when I lay awake listening to the hum of the city outside our window, I couldn't shake the feeling that Emily's world and mine weren't the same. There was a side to her I hadn't seen, a shadow behind the smiles and reassurances, and it made my chest tighten every time I thought about it. Something was coming, something I wasn't ready for, and I had no idea how deep the web of her secrets went. I'll never forget the night Emily dropped the news. We were curled up on the couch after a quiet dinner, the city lights spilling through the blinds, and she looked at me with that soft, almost vulnerable expression I loved so much. "I'm pregnant," she said, her voice trembling just enough to make my heart leap. For a moment, everything else disappeared, the exhaustion, the stress, the unease I'd been feeling. All I could think was that this was it, the life we'd been planning finally coming together. I felt a mix of shock and joy, the kind that made your chest ache in the best possible way. "Pregnant," I whispered, my voice catching. She nodded, biting her lip, and tears glistened in her eyes. "Yeah, it's happening," she said softly. I wanted to hold her forever in that moment, to tell her everything was going to be okay, that I'd do anything to make her and our baby safe and happy. I believed her completely, but even as I felt the rush of excitement, something nagged at the back of my mind. She had chosen this exact moment right after I'd cleared another chunk of her debts, and the timing was too perfect to be coincidental. My hands shook slightly as I tried to push the thought away. "Are you sure?" I asked cautiously, not wanting to sound doubtful. "Yes," she whispered, resting her hand over mine. "I've been careful." Over the next few days, everything shifted. I dove headfirst into preparing for the future, researching prenatal vitamins, helping her pick out baby clothes, talking about larger apartments closer to work. I wanted to be the perfect partner, the perfect father-to-be, I told my friends, and they were thrilled, congratulating me on the next chapter of our lives. Emily smiled, thanking me for being so supportive, but there was this strange glimmer in her eyes, a mix of triumph and calculation that made my stomach twist. Late at night, lying beside her, I felt both elated and uneasy. Something about the way she spoke, the way she positioned herself emotionally, it didn't feel entirely genuine, but I convinced myself it was just fear, just the overwhelming weight of a life-changing moment. Still, as I drifted off to sleep, I couldn't shake the faint, prickling doubt that this miracle might not be what it seemed, and a tiny voice whispered that I wasn't seeing the whole picture. After Emily told me she was pregnant, I threw myself completely into making sure she felt safe and cared for. I upgraded our apartment, bought every baby item she mentioned, and made sure every payment from prenatal care to insurance was handled. Friends noticed the change in me. "You're working yourself to the bone," one said over coffee. I laughed it off, but inside, I felt the strain deep in my chest. Every late night at work, every skipped dinner with friends, every penny spent it, all felt worth it for the life I thought we were building together. But then, the subtle digs began. Emily's gratitude became thinner, her smiles less sincere. "You don't have to do everything for me, you know," she said one evening, her voice flat. She flipped through her phone. I froze, because the words felt less like thanks and more like judgment. I started noticing her tone changing in small ways when I asked about a payment. She'd sigh dramatically, look away, or mutter, "You're so obsessed with money." The warmth I thought was mutual suddenly had sharp edges. The real shock came when I started noticing inconsistencies. Medical appointments she mentioned didn't always line up. The scans she showed me seemed generic, and I caught her brushing off questions too quickly. My stomach churned every time I tried to rationalize it. Deep down, I knew something wasn't right, but I couldn't bring myself to face it fully. I wanted to trust her, to believe that this was real, that we were building a family. Then came the messages I accidentally glimpsed one night. Her phone buzzed on the counter while she was in the shower. A notification popped up. Someone had written, "He still has no idea, right?" My heart stopped. That simple sentence made the air in the room feel thick, heavy, suffocating. I stared at the screen, my fingers numb. My world shifted, and for the first time, I realized I might have been a pawn in a carefully crafted game. I lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of months of trust, effort, and love pressing down on me. The glow of city lights through the blinds mocked me as I wondered how I could have been so blind. Something had changed irreversibly, but I didn't know how deep the deception went, and I couldn't shake the dread that the life I was working so hard to build might never exist. It hit me slowly at first, the way the foundation of everything I thought I knew about Emily was cracking. I started checking things quietly, just little things at first: bank statements, missed bills, messages I hadn't noticed before, and then I saw it, the pattern. Payments disappearing, money funneling in ways that made no sense, and texts that made my chest sink so hard it felt like I couldn't breathe. She had been lying to me, manipulating me, using my care and trust to cover her own tracks. I remember sitting at the kitchen table, staring at the screen, my hands trembling. There were messages between her and someone I didn't know, laughing about how easy it's been and he buys everything without question. My heart slammed against my ribs. I wanted to scream, to throw something, to confront her immediately, but a part of me froze. I couldn't believe this was happening. The woman I was going to spend my life with had been deceiving me all along. Emily began to sense something had shifted. She grew impatient, subtly threatening me, her words coated with false vulnerability. "If you doubt me, you're going to regret it," she said one night, brushing her hair back as if to hide a smirk. I could see the thrill behind her eyes, the control she thought she had over me. And yet, even as the fear threatened to swallow me, a cold clarity settled in. I wouldn't let her know I had figured it out, not yet. Then, the messages I saw hit me the hardest. She was mocking me to her friends, calling me so dumb for paying off her debts, for trusting her, for loving her. It felt like the rug had been pulled out from under me. I sat there for hours, numb, my mind racing. This wasn't just manipulation, this was calculated. Every kind word, every smile, every sacrifice I made had been used against me. I hit a rock bottom I never expected. Alone in the apartment, the city lights outside mocking me, I felt despair, like a physical weight pressing into my chest. But beneath the hurt, beneath the betrayal, a thought began to grow. I wouldn't lose everything. She thought she had power over me, but she underestimated how far I was willing to go to protect myself. And in that quiet, painful night, I started planning, careful, patient, and precise. Something had to change, and soon, by the next morning, I had a plan. I couldn't confront Emily openly, not yet, but I needed to gather every piece of evidence I could. I spent hours going through bank statements, loan documents, and old messages, piecing together a timeline of her lies. Every unpaid bill I had covered, every payment she had hidden, every manipulation she had executed, it was all there. My hands shook as I compiled it, not from fear, but from the weight of realizing just how long I had been deceived. Emily acted normal, completely unaware that I knew. She smiled, hugged me, whispered, "Thanks for being so supportive." But inside, I was sharp, calculating, patient. Every word she said, every gesture, every "I love you" was now being measured. I knew I had to play this carefully. Any hint that I had discovered her secrets could make her act defensively, cover her tracks further, or worse, manipulate me into looking like the bad guy. The quiet moments were the hardest. I'd watch her from the kitchen as she hummed softly while making coffee, pretending that nothing had changed, pretending I was still the devoted partner she thought I was. My stomach twisted with the betrayal, but I kept calm. I had proof enough to protect myself and expose her in the right way. I just had to wait for the perfect moment. I also started documenting everything externally. I took screenshots, downloaded statements, and even reached out to creditors discreetly, making sure there was a paper trail that she couldn't deny. Every step I took was measured, precise, and silent. No confrontation, no yelling. No impulsive actions. I wanted the power to shift entirely in my hands. That night, lying in bed beside her, I felt a strange mixture of anger, hurt, and grim satisfaction. She drifted off, unaware that I had everything I needed. My heart pounded quietly in my chest as I realized I held the truth, and soon the consequences would be hers. But for now, I had to be patient, and the weight of that patience was almost as heavy as the betrayal itself. Something was about to change, and she had no idea it was coming. I started taking the first careful steps to protect myself, quietly exposing Emily's web of lies without making a scene. I contacted a few creditors and financial institutions, alerting them to discrepancies in her accounts and fraudulent claims, all without her knowing. It was meticulous work hours spent documenting, verifying, and ensuring every piece of evidence was watertight. I felt a grim sense of satisfaction, knowing that her carefully constructed world of manipulation was starting to crumble silently. Piece by piece. Emily, meanwhile, began showing signs of paranoia. She'd glance at me suddenly, as if sensing I knew something, and her smiles sometimes flickered with unease. "You've been quiet lately. What are you thinking about?" she asked one evening, her voice sharp but laced with curiosity. I just shrugged, masking the storm inside me. "Nothing," I said lightly, keeping my tone calm. She accepted it for the moment, but I could feel her anxiety growing like a shadow, creeping through the apartment. There was a strange thrill in the quietness of it all. Unlike before, when I had been the one blindly giving, now I had control. Every text she sent, every attempt to manipulate me, was now being documented, used, and stored in a way that would leave her powerless if she ever tried to turn the tables. And she didn't even know it. The tension between us became almost unbearable in private moments. I could see it in her eyes, glimpses of fear, of doubt, the first cracks appearing in the confident, untouchable persona she had perfected. And yet, she still tried. One night, she whispered, "I don't know what you're thinking, but I hope you're not planning anything." I smiled softly, inside knowing that the truth I had amassed would speak louder than any words I could say. That night, as I lay in bed watching her sleep, I felt the weight of months of deception, betrayal, and manipulation. But beneath that weight, there was something new, a quiet, controlled power. Emily thought she was in control, but the reality was completely reversed. And deep down, I knew it was only a matter of time before the world she had built on my trust began to unravel. Completely, the first real cracks in Emily's carefully curated world started appearing without me having to say a word. I had quietly alerted creditors and flagged accounts, and suddenly she began losing access to funds she had counted on. I watched as she scrambled, pacing the apartment, checking her phone, and muttering under her breath, "What's happening? Why can't I pay this? This isn't possible." Her panic was almost poetic. She had built her little empire on my trust, and now it was slipping through her fingers. She tried to manipulate me again, her voice trembling with faux innocence. "I don't know why this is happening. Maybe you did something." I remained silent, calm, collected. Every attempt she made to guilt me or twist the narrative fell flat because I had already anticipated her moves. Her fear, her scramble, it was satisfying in a way I hadn't expected, but it was quiet, measured. I didn't need to yell, to confront. To dramatize, the consequences were unfolding on their own. The worst moment for her came when friends and family started noticing inconsistencies. Casual remarks like, "Emily, didn't you just tell me you paid that off?" Or, "Wait, I thought you didn't owe anything anymore," began to surface. She fumbled, stammered, and tried to weave excuses, but the web she had spun was unraveling in front of everyone. I could see her social credibility slipping through her fingers, her facade cracking as she realized the full scope of what she had done. Even as her world collapsed, I felt a strange mixture of relief and exhaustion. Months of betrayal, manipulation, and sleepless nights had led to this moment, and yet I had kept my composure. I was still careful, still silent, letting the truth expose itself. And I watched, almost in disbelief, as Emily realized she had no leverage, no control, and no one to bail her out this time. That night, she cornered me in the kitchen, her voice low, almost desperate. "Please, you don't understand. I can fix this." I just looked at her, letting the silence hang between us. Deep down, I knew she had lost everything she had tried to steal from me, and the quiet reckoning had only just begun. The final pieces fell into place quietly, methodically, and without a single dramatic confrontation. I had amassed all the evidence bank statements, messages, proof of the debts I had paid, and her lies about the pregnancy. Now I could let the truth speak for itself. I shared it strategically with close friends and family, calmly presenting facts, letting the weight of reality do the work. No yelling, no tears, just cold, undeniable evidence that left no room for excuses. Watching her stumble through explanations, her face pale and her voice shaky, was surreal. Emily tried to spin the story, tried to play the victim, but every lie she had told was documented. Every attempt to manipulate me had backfired spectacularly. I can explain. She stammered at one point, but no one wanted explanations anymore. The evidence was clear, and she had nothing left to hold on to. I could see the disbelief and panic in her eyes as friends started questioning her, demanding proof of her stories. And slowly realizing she had been deceiving everyone for months, there was a strange, almost eerie satisfaction in the calmness of it all. I didn't have to shout, to shame, to publicly humiliate her. The consequences had unfolded naturally, silently, and completely. Every debt she had tried to trap me with, every lie she had spun to manipulate my care, had come back on her. She lost the financial control she had counted on. Her credibility vanished, and the people who once admired her began to see her for who she really was. Even in that moment, Emily looked at me, desperate, pleading. "Please, you don't understand. It's not what it seems." Her voice cracked, and for the first time, I realized she had never considered me capable of quiet, calculated patience. I let her plead, my expression unreadable, because the payoff was not in my words but in the silence of undeniable truth. As I watched her stumble, defeated and powerless, I felt a mix of relief, vindication, and exhaustion. The betrayal had been deep, but the quiet, deliberate exposure had been more powerful than anything I could have screamed. And as I walked away from the confrontation, I finally understood Di had not only protected myself, but reclaimed control of my life in a way she could never touch. The days after the exposure were surreal. Emily retreated, humiliated and desperate, while I slowly started to rebuild the life that had been weighed down by her lies for months. I reconnected with friends and family who had stood by me quietly, and their support reminded me that I wasn't alone in this. Every small victory paying off lingering debts, reclaiming control over shared finances, simply breathing without the constant anxiety felt monumental. I realized how much emotional weight I had been carrying and how much freedom there was in letting it go. I began reflecting on everything I had sacrificed: social life, money, and peace of mind. And peace of mind, while it had been painful, it also taught me a brutal lesson in trust and boundaries. I no longer felt the need to explain myself to Emily or justify the choices I had made for our shared life. Her credibility had evaporated, and so had her influence over me. Each day felt lighter, and for the first time in months, I felt a sense of clarity and purpose that had nothing to do with her. Even as I started moving forward, the anger lingered. I replayed moments of manipulation, deception, and betrayal. But I tempered it with the quiet satisfaction of having handled everything deliberately, strategically. I hadn't let her dictate the narrative, and in doing so, I reclaimed my dignity. Slowly, I realized that the greatest revenge wasn't in confrontation or shaming, it was in quietly walking away while she faced the consequences of her own actions. Sometimes, late at night, I'd catch a glimpse of her on social media or hear stories from mutual friends about her struggles to regain credibility. It stung briefly, but it also reinforced the lesson. Power lies not in fury, but in patience, awareness, and timing. And as I lay in bed alone, reflecting on the months of deception and the emotional chaos, I felt a quiet strength growing inside me, a confidence I hadn't known I could hold. Even though the storm had passed, I knew this experience had changed me forever. The question lingered in my mind like a whisper in the dark. Could I ever fully trust again? And deep down, I realized the answer would be yes, but on my terms, and only with someone who deserved it. The final chapter of that nightmare came not with a bang, but with quiet, unwavering control. Emily had lost everything she had tried to manipulate me into giving: money, credibility, and influence over my life. I didn't gloat, didn't confront her in anger. I simply moved forward, reclaiming the peace and stability that had been stripped from me for so long. Each morning felt lighter, the apartment felt calmer, and I finally began to breathe without the weight of constant betrayal pressing down on me. I focused on myself, reconnecting with passions I had set aside, rebuilding friendships, and setting boundaries that I should have enforced months ago. There was a strange empowerment in this silence. Emily could see the consequences of her actions, yet I didn't need to rub her nose in it. She had played her game, and the quiet truth had been far more devastating than any public spectacle could have been. I had learned that patience, observation, and strategic action could dismantle someone's manipulation without ever losing my own integrity. Occasionally, I'd catch glimpses of her attempting to rebuild her life, trying to regain friends, repair her image, but she lacked the trust and influence she once wielded over me. The irony wasn't lost on me. While she had tried to entrap me, I had walked away stronger, wiser, and untouched by her deceit. I realized the ultimate victory wasn't in revenge, it was in reclaiming my own life free from her lies, and in refusing to let her have power over me ever again. As I stood on the balcony one evening, the city lights stretching endlessly below, I felt a sense of closure wash over me. The betrayal, the manipulation, and the heartbreak had shaped me. Yes, but they had also forged resilience, clarity, and a newfound sense of self. Emily had lost the battle quietly, just as I had planned, and I had gained far more than I ever could have imagined: control, peace, and the confidence to trust carefully, wisely, and on my own terms. The chapter had ended. The storm passed, and for the first time in a long time, I could imagine the future bright, unburdened, and entirely mine. And as I turned away from the city lights, I knew one truth for certain. Sometimes, the quietest victories are the most complete, the most satisfying, and the hardest for a manipulator to ever recover from.